Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Manhattan, New York, Metropolitan Museum Gala. Sophie Bennett tugged at the borrowed Armani dress for the third time in 5 minutes, praying the safety pin holding the back together wouldn't give way. As a freelance journalist who'd sweet-talked her way into the most exclusive charity gala in Manhattan, she knew she was walking a tightrope. Her mission was simple: land an exclusive interview with one of New York's elite for City Pulse Weekly. What she didn't expect was to literally crash into the most ruthless man in America. "Watch it." The deep voice cut through the champagne-fueled chatter as Sophie stumbled, sending a glass of Dom Perignon cascading down his pristine white dress shirt. She looked up and felt her blood turn to ice water. Ethan Caldwell, heir to the Caldwell financial empire, known for his glacial demeanor and legendary ability to destroy competitors with a single board meeting. At 34, he was Forbes's most eligible bachelor and Manhattan's most untouchable man. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," Sophie stammered, grabbing cocktail napkins and frantically dabbing at the stain. "It was an accident, I swear." Ethan's steel blue eyes scanned her with laser precision, taking in everything from her clearly second-hand clutch to the designer dress that was obviously not her size. "You don't belong here," he said quietly, his voice carrying absolute certainty. That's when Sophie saw her. Across the marble floor, Isabella Thornton, the Ice Queen editor who'd fired Sophie from elite Manhattan in spectacular fashion, was gliding toward them with her signature predatory smile. Behind her trailed Manhattan's most vicious gossip columnists. Panic clawed at Sophie's throat. If Isabella recognized her, it wouldn't just kill her story. It would be career suicide. Isabella would make sure Sophie never worked in journalism again. "Please," Sophie whispered, her fingers gripping Ethan's arm, "just pretend you know me for 5 minutes." Ethan raised one dark eyebrow, clearly intrigued by her audacity. "Sophie, what a delicious surprise." Isabella's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I had no idea people of your caliber received invitations to events like this." The nearby socialites tittered behind their champagne glasses, and Sophie felt heat flood her cheeks. It was now or never. "Actually," Sophie said, lifting her chin and sliding her arm through Ethan's, "I'm here with my fiancé." The silence that followed could have shattered crystal. Isabella's Botoxed face went pale. "Fiancé?" she asked. "Yes," Sophie continued, her heart hammering against her ribs as she felt Ethan go rigid beside her. "Ethan and I have been together for months, haven't we, darling?" 300 pairs of eyes turned toward them. Camera phones appeared like magic. Sophie could feel the weight of Ethan's stare boring into the side of her head, but there was no backing down now. "Is this true?" Isabella asked Ethan directly, her voice barely concealing her shock. Ethan Caldwell, the man who'd never been photographed with the same woman twice, who treated dating like hostile takeovers, looked down at Sophie. For one terrifying second, she saw something flash in those blue eyes. Amusement, interest. "It's true," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. And then, to the collective gasp of Manhattan's elite, he pulled Sophie closer and pressed a kiss to her temple. "Sophie is my fiancée." The room erupted. Phones buzzed with incoming calls. Camera flashes exploded like paparazzi fireworks. And Sophie Bennett, broke freelance journalist with $47 in her checking account, found herself engaged to the most powerful and dangerous man in New York. Sweet mercy. Isabella Thornton looked like she'd swallowed a live scorpion. "Well," she managed, her voice strangled, "congratulations." As the crowd pressed closer, hungry for details, Ethan's hand found the small of Sophie's back. His touch was warm, possessive, and sent an unexpected jolt of electricity up her spine. "Smile, darling," he murmured against her ear, his breath making her shiver. "You wanted to play in the big leagues. Welcome to the game." Sophie pasted on her brightest smile as dozens of Manhattan's most influential people surrounded them, with congratulations and barely concealed curiosity. But inside, one thought kept circling her mind like a vulture. What have I gotten myself into? As if reading her thoughts, Ethan's grip on her waist tightened slightly. When she glanced up at him, his expression was unreadable. But there was definitely something predatory in his smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear, but with an undertone that made her stomach flip. "I always take excellent care of what's mine." The cameras loved it. The crowd ate it up. And Sophie realized she'd just made a deal with the devil himself. Game on. Caldwell, Manhattan. The morning after felt like waking up from a fever dream. except the headlines screaming from every gossip blog and news outlet made it brutally real. Caldwell's mystery bride. Who is Sophie Bennett? Sophie stared at her laptop screen from her cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, coffee growing cold in her hands. The photo was everywhere. Ethan's arm around her waist, both of them looking like they belonged in the same stratosphere despite the obvious chaos of the moment. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since 6 o'clock a.m. Reporters, bloggers, distant cousins she hadn't spoken to since high school. She'd switched it to airplane mode an hour ago, but the constant buzzing against her nightstand was making her crazy. A sharp knock at her door made her jump out of her skin. Sophie Bennett. The voice was crisp, professional, decidedly expensive. "Mr. Caldwell sent us." Through the peephole, she saw two men in suits that probably cost more than her rent, and a woman with an iPad who looked like she could run a small country. Security detail. Sophie's stomach dropped to her toes. She cracked the door open to find herself face to face with the woman, who introduced herself as Olivia Grant, Ethan's executive assistant. "Mr. Caldwell requests your immediate presence at his office," Olivia said, her smile polite but razor-sharp. "We have a car waiting downstairs. I can just take the subway." "I'm afraid that's no longer an option." Olivia gestured toward her window with one perfectly manicured nail. Sophie peered through her blinds and gasped. At least 15 paparazzi were camped outside her building, telephoto lenses glinting in the morning sun. "Oh crap. Indeed. Shall we?" 30 minutes later, Sophie found herself in the elevator of Caldwell Tower, ascending to the 52nd floor. Her palms were sweating, and she kept smoothing down her only decent blazer, a navy piece she'd bought at Banana Republic 3 years ago, during a rare flush period. The elevator doors opened to reveal a world of glass, steel, and pure intimidation. Ethan's office took up the entire corner of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Manhattan that probably cost more per square foot than most people made in a year. He stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid-fire sentences about merger acquisitions and hostile takeovers. Even from behind, he radiated the kind of power that made Fortune 500 CEOs break out in cold sweats. "I don't care if the Tokyo deal falls through," he was saying. "Find another angle. We have 18 hours. He ended the call and turned around. In the harsh morning light streaming through those massive windows, Sophie could see why Ethan Caldwell was considered one of America's most eligible bachelors. Sharp jawline that could cut glass, dark hair styled with casual perfection, and those eyes, storm blue and calculating, like they could x-ray your soul and find it wanting. "Miss Bennett." His voice held all the warmth of a January morning in Alaska. "Please, sit." Sophie perched on the edge of the leather chair across from his desk, feeling like a defendant about to hear her sentence. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Ethan said, settling into his chair with predatory grace. "You've created quite the situation." "I know I messed up," Sophie blurted out. "I shouldn't have." "Miss Bennett, you've just handed me the perfect solution to a very expensive problem." Sophie blinked. "Come again?" Ethan opened a file on his desk and slid it toward her. Inside were financial documents, legal papers, and what looked like a complex family tree. "My grandfather's will stipulates that I must be married by my 35th birthday to inherit full control of Caldwell Holdings. That's in 8 months. His tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing quarterly projections. "The board has been pressuring me to choose a suitable wife from their pre-approved list." Sophie's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "I never joke about business, Miss Bennett. Marriage to me is business." He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "You need money. Our background check shows maxed-out credit cards and 3 months of overdue rent. I need a wife, temporarily." "This is completely insane, is it?" Ethan turned back to her, and for a split second, she caught something almost human in his expression. "You're already my fake fiancé in the court of public opinion. The media is having a field day. The cold-hearted tycoon falling for the scrappy journalist. My approval ratings actually went up overnight." Sophie felt like she was drowning in quicksand. "You're asking me to marry you for money? I'm offering you a business proposition." Ethan returned to his desk and pulled out another document. "A 12-month marriage contract. You play the devoted wife, attend necessary social functions, and help me secure my inheritance. In return, you receive $5 million plus a fully funded startup budget for your own media company." The number hit Sophie like a physical blow. $5 million. It was more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes of freelance work. "But we're complete strangers," she whispered, "which makes it perfect. No messy emotions, no unrealistic expectations. Just a mutually beneficial business arrangement." Ethan's eyes were unreadable steel. "Though I should warn you, being Mrs. Caldwell won't be a walk in Central Park. The Caldwell name comes with obligations. Scrutiny. People who would love nothing more than to see us fail. Sophie stared at the contract like it might bite her. It was crazy. Completely, utterly insane. She'd be living a lie with a man who looked at her like she was a particularly interesting stock option. But $5 million? I need time to think, she said finally. You have until tonight. Ethan glanced at his Rolex. There's a charity auction at the plaza. Half of Manhattan's power players will be there, including every gossip columnist on the East Coast. If you're not there as my fiancé, I'll simply tell everyone last night was a misunderstanding caused by too much champagne. Your 15 minutes will be over. The threat was delivered with a smile. But Sophie heard it loud and clear. And if I agree? For the first time since she'd walked into his office, Ethan's expression softened just a fraction. Then you'd better buckle up, Sophie Bennett, because being engaged to me is about to become the most complicated job of your life. As Sophie left Caldwell Tower, her head spinning with possibilities and consequences, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of Niagara Falls. The question was, would she jump, or would she let this chance at a completely different life slip through her fingers? 52 floors above her, Ethan Caldwell watched her small figure disappear into the crowd of Midtown Manhattan, something that might have been anticipation flickering in his blue eyes. The game was definitely about to begin, and for the first time in years, he wasn't entirely sure who would win. The Plaza Hotel, Manhattan. Sophie stood in front of the full-length mirror in the luxury suite Ethan had arranged for her, barely recognizing herself. The midnight blue gown hugged her curves like it had been sewn directly onto her body. The fabric so expensive it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. Professional hair and makeup artists had transformed her usual messy waves into an elegant updo, worthy of a red carpet. And her face looked like it belonged on the cover of Vogue. Not bad, Bennett, she murmured to her reflection, trying to calm the butterflies doing aerial acrobatics in her stomach. A soft knock interrupted her pep talk. She opened the door to find Ethan in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than her college tuition, looking like he'd stepped out of a Tom Ford advertisement. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You look. Ethan paused, something flickering in those storm blue eyes. Appropriate, Sophie almost laughed. Only Ethan Caldwell could make a compliment sound like a quarterly earnings report. Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself. She grabbed her clutch, also provided by his fairy godmother assistant Olivia, and tried to ignore how her pulse quickened when he offered his arm. Before we go down, Ethan said, his voice taking on that businesslike tone she was beginning to recognize. We need to establish some ground rules. Ground rules? We're about to perform for some of the most observant people in New York. Socialites who can spot a fake Birkin bag from 50 yards. Business moguls who built their empires on reading people's tells. He adjusted his cufflinks with practiced ease. If we're going to sell this, we need to be convincing. Sophie felt her confidence wobble. What if I mess up? You won't. Ethan's certainty was oddly reassuring. Just follow my lead. Stay close. And remember, we're madly in love. The way he said madly in love, with the same inflection he might use for quarterly projections, should have been funny. Instead, it sent an unexpected shiver down Sophie's spine. Any other tips from the fake relationship playbook? Ethan stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her want to lean in. When I touch you, don't flinch. When I speak to you, look at me like I'm the most fascinating person you've ever met. And if anyone asks about our relationship, let me guess, keep it vague and romantic. Exactly. His smile was sharp as a blade, ready to convince Manhattan's elite that the Ice King had fallen in love. The ballroom at the plaza was a glittering wonderland of crystal chandeliers, fresh orchids, and enough diamonds to fund a small country. Sophie had been to charity events before, usually sneaking in through the service entrance, but never as a guest, never as the guest everyone was staring at, and they were definitely staring. Conversations paused as they entered. Heads turned like a choreographed dance. Sophie could practically feel the weight of 300 pairs of eyes analyzing everything from her dress to her posture, to the way Ethan's hand rested possessively on her lower back. Breathe. Ethan murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. You're doing fine. I feel like a zoo animal. Welcome to my world. There was something almost sympathetic in his voice. It gets easier. Ethan, there you are. A woman in head-to-toe Chanel descended on them like a perfectly coiffed vulture. And this must be the famous Sophie, Eleanor Vanderbilt, Ethan said smoothly. Sophie, meet Eleanor. She sits on the board of half the charities in Manhattan. Eleanor's smile was as sharp as her jewelry. How delightful to finally meet the woman who captured our Ethan's heart. Tell me, dear, How exactly did you two meet? Sophie felt panic flutter in her chest, but before she could stumble through an answer, Ethan's arm tightened around her waist. Sophie was interviewing me for a piece she was writing, he said, his voice taking on a warmth she'd never heard from him. She asked me a question that no one had ever asked before. Oh? Eleanor leaned in, hungry for details. What was that? Ethan looked down at Sophie, and for a second, the practiced charm in his expression shifted into something that looked almost real. She asked me what made me happy. The words hung in the air between them, and Sophie felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with panic. The way he was looking at her, like she actually mattered, like she was worth looking at. How romantic. Eleanor clapped her hands together. And what was your answer? I told her I'd never really thought about it, Ethan said, his eyes still locked on Sophie's. But lately, I've been finding out. Sophie's breath caught. She knew it was an act, knew he was just playing the part they'd agreed on, but the sincerity in his voice made her knees feel wobbly. Well, aren't you two just adorable? Eleanor gushed. I must introduce you to the Rockefellers. They're dying to meet Sophie. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of introductions, air kisses, and carefully crafted small talk. Sophie found herself falling into the rhythm of it. Ethan's hand at her back, his subtle guidance through conversations, the way he included her in discussions about business and politics, like her opinions actually mattered. You're a natural at this, he said during a brief moment alone while they waited for the auction to begin. I'm a journalist, Sophie replied, surprised by how comfortable she felt. Reading people and adapting to situations is part of the job. Is that what you're doing? Reading me? The question caught her off guard. Maybe. Are you an open book, Mr. Caldwell? Hardly. Ethan's smile was enigmatic. Though I have a feeling you might be the first person to actually try. Before Sophie could respond, the lights dimmed, and the auctioneer took the stage. They found their seats at a table near the front, surrounded by Manhattan's elite. Ethan bid on several items a week in the Hamptons, a private dinner with a celebrity chef, a vintage wine collection always with casual confidence. Like dropping $50,000 was as normal as buying coffee. Do you always spend money like this? Sophie whispered during a lull. It's for charity, Ethan replied. Besides, half of these people are my business partners. It's as much about maintaining relationships as it is about giving back. Everything's business with you, isn't it? Ethan turned to look at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. Not everything. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the ballroom. Our next item is a truly unique experience. A private yacht charter in the Mediterranean, donated by Caldwell Holdings. Sophie watched Ethan's jaw tighten, almost imperceptibly. This hadn't been on the program earlier. The bidding starts at $100,000. Hands shot up around the room. Sophie watched in fascination as the price climbed. $200,000. $300,000. $400,000. $500,000. Called a voice from the back of the room. Sophie turned to see who had bid and felt her blood freeze. Isabella Thornton sat at a corner table, her smile triumphant and vicious. $600,000. Ethan's voice cut through the room like a blade. Isabella's smile widened. Chibai. Lingmeiyuan. Sophie could feel the tension radiating from Ethan like heat from a furnace. This wasn't about charity anymore. This was war. $1 million, Ethan said, his voice deadly calm. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Isabella's face went pale, but her smile never wavered. Imeyuan. $2 million. She countered. Ethan started to raise his hand again, but Sophie caught his wrist. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm, but she ignored it. Don't, she whispered. She's baiting you. She's trying to humiliate me in front of people who already know I'm richer than she is. Ethan hissed. You've already proven your point. Let her have it. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face. Then, incredibly, he lowered his hand. Sold to Miss Thornton for $1. $2 million. The auctioneer announced. Around their table, people began to murmur. Sophie held her breath, waiting for Ethan's anger, his disappointment in her interference. Instead, he leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. Interesting strategy, Miss Bennett. Good business is knowing when not to engage, she whispered back, her skin tingling from his proximity. And you think Isabella Thornton isn't worth engaging? Sophie turned to meet his gaze, surprised by how close his face was to hers. I think she just spent $1, $2 million on a yacht trip because she wanted to get under your skin, which means you've already won. Ethan stared at her for a moment longer, then threw back his head and laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. Several heads turned at the sound, as if hearing Ethan Caldwell laugh was a newsworthy event. You know what, Sophie Bennett? He said, his eyes sparkling with something that looked dangerously like admiration. "I think I'm going to enjoy being married to you." As the auction continued around them, Sophie tried to ignore the way her heart had started racing at his words. This was all pretend. She reminded herself, a business arrangement. So why did the look in Ethan's eyes make her feel like maybe, just maybe, some of it was starting to feel real? The game was getting more complicated by the minute. Caldwell Penthouse, Upper East Side. The morning after the Plaza charity auction, Sophie woke up in a bed that cost more than her annual salary. Egyptian cotton sheets, a mattress that felt like sleeping on a cloud, and a view of Central Park that made her feel like she was living in a movie. For a blissful few seconds, she forgot where she was and how she'd gotten there. Then reality came flooding back like a cold shower. She was in Ethan Caldwell's penthouse, in his guest room, because after the auction, when paparazzi had followed them to 3 different restaurants, Ethan had made an executive decision that she needed to stay somewhere with actual security. Olivia had packed up Sophie's entire apartment, all 2 suitcases worth, and moved her in while they were still at dinner. "It's temporary," Ethan had assured her as his doorman carried her meager belongings to the elevator. "Just until the media attention dies down." That was 3 days ago. The media attention had only gotten worse. Sophie padded to the massive windows in her silk pajamas, another Olivia acquisition, and looked down at the street. Sure enough, photographers were stationed across from the building, like a small army. Telephoto lenses trained on the windows. "They've been there since 5 a.m. Ethan's voice came from behind her. Sophie spun around to find him leaning against the doorframe, already dressed in what she'd learned was his standard uniform. Perfectly tailored suit, crisp white shirt, tie that probably cost more than most people's car payments. His dark hair was still slightly damp from his shower, and she caught a hint of that expensive cologne that had been haunting her dreams. "Don't you ever sleep in?" she asked, suddenly very aware that her pajamas were basically silk shorts and a camisole that left little to the imagination. "Early bird gets the worm," Ethan said, but his eyes flickered down her legs before snapping back to her face. "Besides, I have a breakfast meeting with the board in an hour. They want to meet my fiancé." Sophie's stomach dropped. "Today? But I'm not ready. Olivia left appropriate attire in your closet." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "Don't worry, it's just breakfast. Think of it as practice for the real challenges ahead." "What real challenges?" Ethan walked over to stand beside her at the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "My family." The way he said it made Sophie's blood run cold. "Your family? My mother called last night. She's throwing us an engagement party this weekend. 200 guests, full media coverage, and every member of the Caldwell family tree." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Including my charming stepbrother, Lucas." Sophie sank into the plush armchair by the window. "This is getting really complicated really fast." "It gets worse," Ethan continued, his voice taking on that dangerous edge she was beginning to recognize. "Lucas has been trying to undermine my position with the board for years. He sees our engagement as his golden opportunity to prove I'm not stable enough to run the company." "What does that mean for us?" Ethan turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense. "It means we need to be perfect, not just convincing, perfect. One slip, one moment where we don't look completely devoted to each other, and Lucas will pounce." Sophie felt the weight of what they were doing settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we should just call it off." "No." Ethan's voice was sharp, final. "We've come too far to back down now." He moved closer, crouching down so they were at eye level. This close, Sophie could see tiny flecks of green in his blue eyes, could count his ridiculously long eyelashes. "Sophie, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money anymore. If Lucas succeeds in discrediting me, Caldwell Holdings will be torn apart. 20,000 employees will lose their jobs. Pension funds will disappear. Entire communities that rely on our manufacturing plants will be decimated." The sincerity in his voice, the genuine concern for people she'd never even met, caught Sophie off guard. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she'd first encountered. This was someone who actually cared about the consequences of his actions. "Okay," she said quietly. "So, what do we do?" Ethan's relief was palpable. "We give them a love story they'll never forget." 2 hours later, Sophie found herself in the private dining room of the Caldwell Holdings building, facing 12 of the most intimidating people she'd ever met. The board of directors looked like they'd been cast from the same mold: expensive suits, calculating eyes, and smiles that never quite reached their faces. Sophie, darling. Ethan's mother, Margaret Caldwell, glided over with the grace of a woman who'd never had to hurry anywhere in her life. She was beautiful in that ageless way that only serious money could buy. Perfectly styled silver hair, flawless skin, and jewelry that could probably fund a small nation's defense budget. "Mrs. Caldwell," Sophie said, offering her hand. "It's wonderful to finally meet you." Margaret ignored the handshake and pulled Sophie into an air kiss embrace that smelled like Chanel No. 5. And judgment. "Please, call me Margaret. We're going to be family." After all, the way she said family made it sound like a prison sentence. "Margaret, don't monopolize the bride-to-be," came a smooth voice from across the room. Sophie turned to see a man who looked like Ethan's evil twin. Same dark hair, same blue eyes. But where Ethan's face was all sharp angles and controlled intensity, this man's features were softer, more conventionally handsome. His smile was warm and welcoming, in a way that immediately put Sophie on guard. "Lucas Caldwell," he said, extending his hand with practiced charm. "The wayward stepbrother. I've heard so much about you, Sophie." "All good things, I hope," Sophie replied, shaking his hand and trying not to wince at his grip. "Oh, absolutely, though I have to admit, I'm curious about how you two actually met." Ethan's been remarkably vague about the details. Sophie felt Ethan's hand settle on her lower back, a warm reminder of his presence. "I told you, Lucas, Sophie was interviewing me for an article." "Yes, but which article?" Lucas's smile never wavered. "I've had my people look into Sophie's recent work, and I can't seem to find any pieces about Caldwell Holdings or Ethan specifically." The room went quiet. Sophie could feel every pair of eyes focused on her, waiting for her answer. Her mind raced, trying to come up with something plausible. "It was for a profile piece about New York's most eligible bachelors," she said, the lie rolling off her tongue with surprising ease. "Obviously, it never got published once Ethan and I started dating. Professional ethics and all that." "How admirably principled," Lucas said, but his eyes remained calculating. "And which publication was this for?" "City Pulse Weekly," Sophie replied without hesitation. "Though, as I said, the piece was killed once our personal relationship developed." Ethan's hand pressed slightly against her back. Approval, she hoped, not panic. "Well, regardless of how it started," Margaret interjected with the kind of smile that could cut glass, "we're simply thrilled that Ethan has finally found someone special. Tell me, Sophie, what are your thoughts on children?" Sophie nearly choked on her mimosa. "Children? Well, naturally, we're all hoping for grandchildren eventually. The Caldwell line must continue, after all." "Mother," Ethan's voice held a warning, but Margaret waved him off. "Oh, don't be such a prude, darling. It's a perfectly reasonable question." She turned back to Sophie with laser focus. "You do want children, don't you, dear?" Sophie felt like she was being interrogated by the world's most polite assassin. Well, Ethan and I haven't really discussed. We want to enjoy being married first," Ethan interrupted smoothly, his arm sliding around Sophie's waist in a gesture that looked possessive and protective. "There's plenty of time for family planning later." "Of course," Margaret agreed, but Sophie caught the sharp look she exchanged with Lucas. "Though at your age, Ethan, one doesn't want to wait too long." The breakfast continued in much the same vein. Pointed questions disguised as friendly conversation, subtle attempts to trip Sophie up, and an undercurrent of tension that made her feel like she was walking through a minefield in high heels. By the time they made their escape, Sophie's head was pounding, and her cheeks hurt from maintaining her fake smile. "That went well," Ethan said as they stepped into his private elevator. Sophie stared at him in disbelief. "Well, your stepbrother was basically conducting a deposition, and your mother asked me about my reproductive plans before I'd finished my coffee." "Welcome to the Caldwell family dynamic," Ethan said dryly. "Lucas has been trying to find dirt on me since he was 12, and I got the bigger inheritance from our grandfather. And my mother, well, she means well. But subtlety has never been her strong suit." "This is insane," Sophie said, leaning against the elevator wall. "How are we supposed to fool these people for an entire year?" "The same way we fooled them this morning," Ethan replied, moving closer. By being a team, something in his voice made Sophie look up. He was standing directly in front of her now, one hand braced against the wall beside her head. The elevator suddenly felt very small and very warm. "Sophie," he said quietly, "I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know it's harder than either of us anticipated." "Ethan, let me finish." His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin in a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "You were incredible in there. Quick, thinking, graceful under pressure, and you didn't let them intimidate you. I couldn't have asked for a better partner in this." The word partner hung between them, loaded with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Sophie could feel the warmth of his palm against her face, could see the way his eyes had darkened as he looked at her. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. "I know." His thumb traced her lower lip, and Sophie's heart started beating double time. "But if we're going to do this, we need to be all in. No half measures. No holding back." "What are you saying?" Ethan's eyes searched her face, and for a moment, Sophie thought he might kiss her. The air between them crackled with electricity, and she found herself leaning slightly forward, drawn by some invisible force. Then the elevator dinged, and the moment shattered. Ethan stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place like armor. "I'm saying we need to practice. A lot. If we're going to convince my family that we're madly in love, we need to be comfortable with each other. Physically comfortable." Sophie's cheeks burned. Physically comfortable? Hand-holding, casual touches. The kind of intimacy that couples take for granted. Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact, but Sophie caught the slight flush on his neck. "We can't afford to look awkward or uncomfortable around each other." "Right. Practice." Sophie straightened her shoulders, trying to regain her composure. "That makes sense." "There's something else," Ethan said as the elevator doors opened onto his floor. "The engagement party. My mother wants to announce the wedding date." Sophie's stomach dropped. "What wedding date?" "We haven't set a wedding date." "We have now. The 15th of June. 3 months from now." 3 months? Sophie's voice came out as a squeak. "But that's so soon." "It's what my mother expects. Quick engagement, quick wedding, quick grandchildren." Ethan's smile was grim. "Don't worry. We'll figure out a way to delay things after the party. Maybe a family emergency or a scheduling conflict with your family." Sophie nodded, trying to process everything. 3 months. They had 3 months to pull off the wedding of the century, fool Manhattan's elite, and somehow avoid falling into whatever this dangerous attraction was that kept sparking between them. "Oh, and Sophie," Ethan said as they walked toward his penthouse door, "you should probably call your family. Let them know they'll be invited to a Caldwell wedding. My mother will want to meet them before the engagement party." Sophie's blood turned to ice. "My family? Your parents? Siblings? Whoever you want included in the wedding party." Ethan pulled out his keys, completely oblivious to Sophie's panic. "Don't worry about the expense. We'll fly them out first class. Put them up at the plaza. Nothing but the best for my future in-laws." Sophie stood frozen in the hallway, watching Ethan unlock his door. Her family? He wanted to meet her family. How exactly was she supposed to explain that her family consisted of her alcoholic father who disappeared when she was 16, her mother who died of cancer 3 years ago, and absolutely no one else in the world who would vouch for the fact that she was worthy of marrying Ethan Caldwell? "Sophie, you okay?" Ethan turned back to her, concern creasing his forehead. "Yeah," she managed, forcing a smile. "Just processing everything. It's a lot. I know." His expression softened. "But we'll get through it. Together." As they entered the penthouse, Sophie tried to ignore the way her heart jumped at the word together. She had bigger problems than her growing attraction to her fake fiancé. She had to figure out how to invent a family worthy of the Caldwell name, survive an engagement party that would be covered by every gossip magazine in America, and somehow keep her real identity hidden from people who could afford to hire private investigators to find out what she'd had for breakfast in 3rd grade. And she had to do it all while pretending to be madly in love with a man who was starting to make her forget that any of this was pretend. The game was getting more dangerous by the day, and Sophie was beginning to realize that her heart might be the ultimate casualty. Caldwell Penthouse and the Hamptons. Sophie stood in Ethan's home office at 2 a.m., staring at a whiteboard covered in her increasingly desperate attempts to construct a fictional family. She'd drawn family trees, written backstories, and even created fake social media profiles. Nothing seemed believable enough to fool the Caldwell investigation machine. Option 1. Parents died in a car crash, she muttered, erasing the board for the 4th time. Too tragic. Option 2. Parents are traveling missionaries in Africa. Too convenient. Option 3. I'm an orphan raised by my grandmother who just passed away. Too Oliver Twist. Talking to yourself is usually the first sign of a breakdown. Sophie spun around to find Ethan standing in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep, wearing nothing but pajama pants that rode low on his hips. She tried very hard not to notice the way the hallway light cast shadows across his chest. "I didn't wake you, did I?" she asked, suddenly aware that she was wearing one of his Harvard t-shirts over her shorts. After 3 days of living together, they'd fallen into an oddly domestic routine that felt far too comfortable. Couldn't sleep anyway. Ethan walked over to examine her whiteboard, standing close enough that she could smell his soap and something uniquely him. Family planning at 2:00 the morning. That's dedication, more like desperation. Sophie sank into his leather desk chair, suddenly exhausted. "Ethan, I can't do this. I can't invent an entire family and expect to fool people who probably have FBI-level background check capabilities. Ethan studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Sophie, where is your real family? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Sophie had been dreading this moment since the elevator conversation, knowing that eventually the truth would have to come out. My mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. The words came out flat, emotionless. She'd learned that was the only way to say them without falling apart. My dad, he left when I was 16. Haven't heard from him since. Ethan's face went very still. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Sophie managed a weak smile. Just bad luck in the parent lottery. No siblings. No extended family that claims me. It's just been me for a long time. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Finally, Ethan moved to the bar cart in the corner and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to Sophie. So, we have a problem, he said, settling into the chair across from her. We have several problems. Sophie took a sip of the whiskey and felt it burn away some of her anxiety. Your family expects to meet my family. Your mother probably wants to plan joint family activities. And Lucas is definitely going to investigate everyone I claim to be related to. Then we don't give him fake people to investigate. Ethan's voice took on that calculating tone she recognized from his business calls. We give him real people. Sophie blinked. What are you talking about? My family. Ethan set down his glass and leaned forward. What if your family died in that car crash, but you were raised by your mother's best friend? What if that woman considered you a daughter, and her family became your family? Ethan, I can't ask strangers to pretend to be my relatives. Not strangers. Ethan's smile was sharp, triumphant. My Aunt Clara and Uncle Henry, my mom's younger sister and her husband, they live in Boston. They've never liked the Caldwell family politics, and they owe me a favor from when I helped them save their restaurant 5 years ago. Sophie stared at him. You want your own relatives to pretend to be my relatives. Think about it. Clara is nothing like my mother. She's warm, genuine, completely unimpressed by money. She married a high school English teacher. For crying out loud, she's exactly the kind of person who would take in an orphan teenager and love her like her own daughter. But what about when they meet your mother? Won't she recognize her own sister? Ethan's grin was almost wicked. Clara and my mother haven't spoken in 12 years. They had a massive falling out over my mother's 3rd marriage. Clara refuses to attend Caldwell family events, and my mother pretends Clara doesn't exist. Sophie felt a flicker of hope. So, they'd never be in the same room? Not unless we specifically arrange it, which we won't. Ethan was already reaching for his phone. Clara has 2 kids. My cousins, Noah and Mia. Noah's a lawyer in Boston. Mia's a teacher in Vermont. They're good people, Sophie. They'll do this for us. Why would they help? They don't even know me. Ethan's expression softened. Because I'm asking them to. Because despite everything, family matters to Clara. And because once she meets you, she's going to love you. The certainty in his voice made Sophie's chest tight. Ethan, you can't just volunteer your relatives for a massive deception. Watch me. Ethan was already dialing. Clara, yeah, I know it's late. I need a favor. A big one. Sophie listened in fascination as Ethan explained the situation to his aunt, his voice taking on a warmth she'd never heard before. This was a different side of him. Less controlled, more human. She could hear a woman's laughter through the phone, followed by rapid-fire questions. She wants to talk to you, Ethan said, holding out the phone. Sophie took it with trembling hands. Hello, Sophie, sweetheart. The voice was warm with a slight Boston accent. Ethan's told me all about your situation. What a mess those Caldwell vultures have made of things. Mrs. Sullivan, I can't ask you to, Clara, and you're not asking. I'm volunteering. My sister Margaret has been a pretentious witch since she married into money, and anything that gets under her skin is fine by me. Clara's laugh was infectious. Besides, Ethan says you make him happy. That's been in short supply in his life lately. Sophie glanced at Ethan, who was pretending to study his whiskey but was clearly listening to every word. Honey, I don't care if it's real or fake or somewhere in between. That boy has been wound tighter than a Swiss watch since he took over that company. If you can make him laugh the way he did just now, then I'm Team Sophie all the way. No arguments. Henry and I will drive down for the engagement party. We'll bring photo albums, embarrassing stories about your childhood, and enough genuine affection to fool anyone. Noah and Mia are already planning to come, too. They haven't seen Ethan in months. Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. Why would you do this for a stranger? Because you're not a stranger. You're family now. Clara's voice was gentle but fierce. And we take care of family, no matter what. After they hung up, Sophie sat in stunned silence. Ethan refilled her whiskey glass without being asked. That's Clara, Hey Cafe said quietly. She never met a stray she wouldn't adopt. Ethan, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met Noah and Mia. Ethan's smile was rueful. Noah's going to give you the protective big brother interrogation, and Mia is going to want to plan your entire wedding down to the napkin colors. They're really going to do this. Pretend I'm their family. They're not pretending, Sophie. That's not how Clara works. Ethan met her eyes across the desk. Once she claims you, you're claimed permanently. Even after our marriage ends, you'll have Christmas invitations and birthday cards for life. The thought should have been comforting, but instead it made Sophie's chest ache with something she couldn't name. What happens when they find out the truth? When our marriage ends and they realize it was all fake? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. I've never lied to Clara before. She has a way of seeing through people that's unsettling. Maybe we should tell her the truth. No. Sophie's voice was firm. The fewer people who know this is fake, the better. Lucas has spies everywhere, and even Clara might accidentally let something slip. Ethan nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. They were bringing innocent people into their deception, people who seemed genuinely kind. It felt wrong in a way that fooling Ethan's business associates didn't. There's something else, Ethan said, pulling her from her thoughts. My mother called while you were trying to create fictional parents. She wants us to spend the weekend at the family house in the Hamptons, bonding time before the engagement party. Sophie's stomach dropped. This weekend? But that's in 2 days. I know. She's invited Lucas and his wife, Chloe, plus a few family friends. It'll be intense. Define intense. Ethan's smile was grim. Imagine being trapped in a beautiful mansion for 3 days with people who smile at you while plotting your destruction. And did I mention my mother expects us to share a room? Sophie choked on her whiskey. Share a room? We're engaged, Sophie. It would look suspicious if we asked for separate bedrooms. Ethan's cheeks were slightly flushed, but his voice remained steady. Don't worry. I'll sleep on the couch or something. We just need to maintain appearances. Right. Appearances. Sophie tried to ignore the way her pulse quickened at the thought of sharing space with Ethan for an entire weekend. What else should I expect? Tennis tournaments, where the real competition is verbal sparring. Dinner parties, where every conversation is a minefield. And my mother's favorite game. Putting people in situations designed to make them crack under pressure. Sounds delightful. Oh, it gets better. Lucas will probably try to corner you alone at some point. He's excellent at making people say things they don't mean to say. Sophie straightened her shoulders. Let him try. I've been interrogated by arms dealers and drug runners. I think I can handle one entitled stepbrother. Ethan's smile was proud, and something else fond. That's my girl. The casual endearment sent warmth spreading through Sophie's chest. She told herself it didn't mean anything, that it was just part of their act. But the way Ethan was looking at her made it hard to remember what was real and what was performance. We should probably practice, she said, trying to regain some equilibrium. Practice what? Buying supply. If we're sharing a room and spending the weekend with your family, we need to be comfortable with casual intimacy. Sophie stood up, pacing to cover her nervousness. Hand-holding, casual touches, the kind of stuff real couples do without thinking. Ethan watched her pace, his expression unreadable. You're right. We should practice. Something in his voice made Sophie stop and look at him. He'd stood up too, and was moving toward her with that predatory grace that made her stomach flip. Sophie, he said quietly, stopping just inches away from her. If we're going to do this, you need to trust me. Can you do that? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. Ethan reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. When we're around other people, I'm going to touch you. Nothing inappropriate, but intimate. The way a man touches the woman he loves. Sophie's heart was hammering so loud, she was sure he could hear it. Okay, and I'm going to look at you like you're the most important person in the room. Because to sell this, you have to be. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Sophie had to resist the urge to lean into the touch. Can you handle that? I'm tougher than I look, she whispered. I know you are. Ethan's smile was soft, almost tender. That's one of the things He stopped himself, stepping back abruptly. We should get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. Sophie nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been about to say something important, something that might have changed everything between them. Ethan, she called as he reached the doorway. Yeah? Your Aunt Clara. She seems wonderful. Ethan's smile was genuine, unguarded. She is. You'll love her, Sophie, and she's going to love you. As Sophie watched him disappear down the hallway, she tried to ignore the voice in her head that whispered, maybe that was the problem. Maybe being loved by Ethan's family, being welcomed and accepted, would make it that much harder to walk away when their year was up. Maybe some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. The next morning, Sophie woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She found Ethan in the kitchen, already dressed for work, reading something on his tablet while simultaneously managing what looked like a full breakfast spread. You cook? She asked, impressed despite herself. Clara taught me when I was 12, said no nephew of hers would grow up helpless in the kitchen. Ethan glanced up with a smile. Scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, and Olivia's bringing over appropriate Hamptons attire later this morning. Sophie poured herself coffee from the machine that probably cost more than her old car. Appropriate attire, think preppy casual with designer price tags. Sundresses for daytime. Cocktail attire for evening. Something sporty for tennis. Ethan's phone buzzed, and he frowned at the screen. Speaking of which, do you play tennis? Does hitting a ball against the wall of my high school gym count? We'll put you down as a beginner. Lucas is competitive about everything, so losing to you would actually irritate him more than if you were good. Sophie was starting to understand the chess game that was Caldwell family dynamics. Every move was calculated. Every interaction a battle for position. Ethan, she said carefully, what happens if I mess this up? If I say the wrong thing or can't keep up with all the subtext and politics? Ethan set down his tablet and gave her his full attention. You won't mess up, but what if? Sophie. He moved around the kitchen island to stand in front of her, hands settling on her shoulders. You infiltrated a charity gala, convinced Manhattan's elite that you belonged there, and handled my mother's interrogation like a pro. You're not going to mess this up. His confidence in her was both reassuring and terrifying. Sophie had been taking care of herself for so long that having someone believe in her felt foreign and wonderful and scary all at once. Besides, Ethan continued with a wicked grin, if anyone gives you trouble, just remember you have information that could destroy them all. What information? You know their biggest secret. Ethan's eyes sparkled with mischief. That the great Ethan Caldwell is capable of falling in love. Sophie's breath caught. For a moment, the kitchen fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic far below. Ethan was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting, and Sophie had to remind herself that it was just practice, just him getting into character. But when he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, it felt anything but fake. Finish your breakfast, he said quietly. We have a weekend to survive. As Sophie watched him gather his things for work, she couldn't shake the feeling that survival might be the least of her problems, because somewhere between the fake engagement and the practice intimacy, she was starting to forget why falling for Ethan Caldwell was such a terrible idea. And based on the way he'd looked at her just now, she wasn't the only one getting confused about what was real and what was just part of the game. The weekend in the Hamptons was going to be dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with Lucas Caldwell's schemes. Sophie just hoped she was strong enough to remember that when this was all over, she was going to have to walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to her, even if it had started as the most elaborate lie she'd ever told. The Caldwell estate. Hamptons. The Caldwell family estate in the Hamptons looked like something out of The Great Gatsby. Sprawling lawns that rolled down to a private beach, a main house that could accommodate a small army, and enough luxury to make royalty jealous. Sophie pressed her nose to the window of Ethan's Tesla as they drove up the circular driveway, trying not to gawk like a tourist. Breathe, Ethan said softly, his hand finding hers on her lap. Remember, you belong here. You're my fiancé, and I chose you. That makes you worthy of all of this. Sophie squeezed his fingers, grateful for the anchor of his touch. Over the past week, they'd practiced casual intimacy until it felt almost natural. Hand-holding, brief kisses, the way he'd rest his hand on her lower back when they walked. But now, facing the reality of 3 days with his family, everything felt monumentally more complicated. There's Lucas, Ethan said grimly as they pulled to a stop. Sophie saw a man who looked like Ethan's prettier, softer brother standing on the front steps with a blonde woman who could have stepped off a magazine cover. Both were smiling, but there was something predatory in Lucas's expression that made Sophie's skin crawl. And that's Chloe, his wife. Ethan continued, former Miss Connecticut, current trophy wife, and absolutely lethal when it comes to social warfare. Great. Any other cheerful warnings before we go in there? Ethan turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious. Sophie, whatever happens this weekend, whatever they say or do to try to get under your skin, remember that we're a team. You and me against them. Always. The intensity in his voice made Sophie's heart skip. Always, always, Ethan repeated. And then he was leaning across the center console to press a soft kiss to her lips. It was supposed to be for show, she knew, in case anyone was watching from the windows. But when Ethan's hand cupped her cheek and he deepened the kiss just slightly, Sophie forgot all about their audience. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing a little harder. For luck, Ethan said quietly. But his eyes were dark, with something that had nothing to do with luck. Right, luck, Sophie managed, trying to ignore the way her lips were still tingling. They were greeted at the door by Margaret Caldwell, who swept Sophie into an embrace that felt more like a territorial claim than a welcome. "Sophie, darling, you look absolutely radiant." "Doesn't she look radiant, Lucas?" Lucas stepped forward with his politician's smile, taking Sophie's hand and holding it just a fraction too long. "Radiant indeed, Sophie. You're even more beautiful than the photographs suggested." "Thank you," Sophie replied, instinctively moving closer to Ethan's side. Something about Lucas made her want to shower. "And this is my wife, Chloe," Lucas continued, gesturing to the blonde vision beside him. Chloe's smile was perfectly calibrated and completely cold. "Sophie, I'm so excited to finally meet the woman who tamed our Ethan. You must tell me all your secrets." "No secrets," Sophie said with a laugh that sounded more natural than she felt. "Just got lucky, I guess." "Oh, I doubt luck had anything to do with it," Chloe said, her blue eyes calculating. "A woman doesn't catch Ethan Caldwell without a very specific plan." The barb was delivered with such sweetness that it took Sophie a moment to realize she'd been insulted. Before she could respond, Ethan's arm tightened around her waist. "The only plan Sophie had was to interview me for a magazine," he said smoothly. "Everything else was just chemistry." The way he said chemistry, low and intimate, made Sophie's cheeks flush. From the corner of her eye, she saw Margaret and Lucas exchange a look. "Well," Margaret said brightly, "let's get you two settled. I've put you in the blue room. It has the most romantic view of the water." As they were led through the house, Sophie tried not to gape at the museum-quality art, the antique furniture, the casual opulence that spoke of generations of wealth. This was Ethan's world, she reminded herself. This was what normal looked like to him. The blue room was stunning, a corner suite with French doors that opened onto a private balcony overlooking the ocean. The bed was massive, draped in silk that probably cost more than Sophie's annual rent. "I hope you'll be comfortable," Margaret said, her eyes sharp as she took in Sophie's reaction. Ethan has always loved this room. So many childhood memories here. After Margaret left them alone, Sophie and Ethan stood in awkward silence, the reality of their situation hitting home. They were going to share this room, this bed, for 3 nights. Suddenly, all their practice sessions felt woefully inadequate. "I can sleep on the couch," Ethan said quietly, nodding toward the sitting area by the windows. "Don't be ridiculous. That couch is smaller than you are." Sophie tried to sound casual, mature. "We're both adults. We can share a bed without... I mean, it's just sleeping, right? Just sleeping." But the way Ethan was looking at her made Sophie think sleeping was going to be the last thing on either of their minds. A knock at the door saved them from further awkwardness. Olivia Grant stood in the hallway with Sophie's weekend bags and an armload of garment bags. "Your afternoon attire, Miss Bennett," Olivia said, with her usual crisp efficiency. "Mrs. Caldwell has planned a tennis tournament, followed by cocktails on the terrace. Mr. Caldwell's tennis whites are already in the closet." After Olivia left, Sophie unzipped the first garment bag to reveal a tennis dress that probably cost more than her car. Everything Olivia had chosen was perfect, elegant, expensive, and exactly what the fiancé of Ethan Caldwell would wear. "I should change," Sophie said, grabbing the tennis outfit and heading for the bathroom. "Sophie," Ethan's voice stopped her at the door. "You don't have to be nervous. You look beautiful in everything." The compliment, delivered so simply and sincerely, made Sophie's chest tight. "Ethan, I mean it." He moved closer, his hand coming up to touch her cheek. "You're going to be amazing this weekend. Just be yourself." "What if myself isn't enough?" Ethan's smile was soft, genuine. "Then they don't deserve you." 20 minutes later, Sophie found herself on the tennis court, racket in hand, facing off against Chloe Caldwell in what was supposedly a friendly game. Ethan was partnered with Lucas on the other side of the net, and Margaret sat in the shade, keeping score and providing commentary. "Such a lovely day for tennis," Chloe said as they warmed up. "Ethan tells me you're relatively new to the game." "Very new," Sophie admitted, missing her first practice serve entirely. "Oh, don't worry." Chloe's smile was razor sharp. "We'll go easy on you, won't we, Lucas?" Lucas's return smile was equally predatory. "Of course. We wouldn't want to embarrass family." The way he said family made it clear he didn't consider Sophie part of it. The first set was a massacre. Sophie had played exactly 3 times in her life, and it showed. Chloe and Lucas moved around the court like professionals, placing shots precisely where Sophie couldn't reach them. Ethan tried to cover for her, but even his skill couldn't compensate for her complete lack of experience. "Don't worry, darling," Margaret called out after Sophie missed another easy shot. "Not everyone can be naturally athletic. I'm sure you have other talents." Sophie gritted her teeth and tried to ignore the condescension dripping from Margaret's voice. This was psychological warfare disguised as a tennis match, and she was losing badly. "Sophie," Ethan said quietly during a break between games. "Ignore them. They're trying to get in your head." "Well, it's working," Sophie muttered. "I'm making you look bad." "You could never make me look bad." Ethan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Besides, I have an idea. Trust me." Sophie nodded, and Ethan's smile turned wicked. "Lucas," Ethan called out, "how about we make this more interesting? A little wager on the second set." Lucas's eyes lit up with competitive fire. "What did you have in mind?" "If Sophie and I win, you donate $50,000 to her favorite charity. If you and Chloe win," Ethan paused as if considering, "I'll donate $100,000 to yours." Sophie stared at Ethan in shock. He was giving them 2-to-1 odds, which basically meant he was planning to lose $100,000 to make her feel better. "Ethan, you don't have to." "Deal," Lucas interrupted, his smile triumphant. "This should be fun." What happened next was like watching a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Ethan didn't suddenly start playing better. Instead, he started playing worse, missing shots he'd made easily in the first set, hitting balls into the net, creating opportunities for Sophie to look better by comparison. But more than that, he started cheering for her loudly, enthusiastically, with genuine pride in his voice, every time she managed to return a shot. "That's my girl," he shouted when Sophie actually managed to hit a winner down the line. "Did you see that perfect placement?" His enthusiasm was infectious. Sophie found herself relaxing, laughing when she missed shots instead of getting frustrated. And something magical happened. She started playing better, not well, but better. "Come on, Sophie," Ethan called out when she was preparing to serve match point. "Show them what you've got." Sophie took a deep breath, tossed the ball up, and somehow managed to hit her first ace of the day. The ball flew past Chloe so fast she didn't even move. The silence that followed was deafening. "Well," Margaret said finally, her voice tight, "what a surprising development." Lucas looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "Lucky shot." "Luck." Ethan vaulted over the net and swept Sophie into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed breathlessly. "That was pure skill. My fiancé, ladies and gentlemen," full of surprises. When he set her down, his hands lingered on her waist, his eyes bright with something that looked dangerously like pride and affection, and something else that made Sophie's heart race. "I can't believe we actually won," she whispered. "I can," Ethan said softly. "You're incredible, Sophie Bennett. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The moment stretched between them, charged with electricity, until Margaret's voice cut through the air like a knife. "How lovely. Such a competitive couple." Her smile was pure venom. "I think we should head in for cocktails, don't you? I'm simply dying to hear more about Sophie's family." As they walked back toward the house, Chloe fell into step beside Sophie. "That was quite a performance," she said quietly, her voice pitched so only Sophie could hear. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you do." Chloe's smile was sweet as poison. "The question is, are you performing for us or for him?" Before Sophie could respond, Chloe had drifted away, leaving Sophie with a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. Cocktails on the terrace were a minefield of subtle insults and loaded questions. Margaret grilled Sophie about her fictional family with the persistence of a prosecutor, while Lucas made pointed comments about gold diggers and women who targeted wealthy men. "It's so refreshing to meet someone so unpolished," Chloe said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Most of the women in our circle are so artificial, don't you think, Margaret?" "Oh, absolutely. There's something to be said for authenticity." Margaret's pause before the word made it sound like an insult. Sophie felt her temper starting to fray. These people were experts at delivering cuts that couldn't be called out directly, and she was getting tired of being their target practice. "I think authenticity is undervalued in general," Sophie said evenly. "It's so easy to hide behind money and status and forget who you really are underneath it all." The silence that followed was arctic. "How philosophical," Lucas said with a thin smile. "And what would you say you are underneath it all, Sophie?" Sophie felt Ethan tense beside her, but she didn't need his protection. "Not for this. Someone who knows the difference between being wealthy and being worthless," she said with a sweet smile that matched Chloe's earlier effort. Margaret's gasp was audible. Lucas's face went red, and Ethan was trying very hard not to laugh. "Well," Margaret said, her voice icy, "I think perhaps it's time to dress for dinner." As they escaped to their room, Ethan was practically vibrating with suppressed laughter. "Did you see Lucas's face?" he whispered as soon as the door closed behind them. "I thought he was going to spontaneously combust." "I probably shouldn't have said that," Sophie said, but she was grinning too. "Your mother looked like she wanted to have me deported." "That was perfect. Absolutely perfect." Ethan's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "You were magnificent down there." The admiration in his voice The way he was looking at her like she'd hung the moon made Sophie's breath catch. They were standing very close, closer than they needed to be, and the air between them was charged with electricity. "Ethan," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. "I know," he said quietly. "I feel it too." For a moment, Sophie thought he might kiss her, really kiss her, not for show or practice or any reason other than because they both wanted it. The want was written all over his face, echoing the desire that was building in her chest. Then Ethan stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "We should get ready for dinner," he said, his voice rough. "My mother will have planned something spectacular, designed to make you uncomfortable." Sophie nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that crashed through her. Right, dinner. But as she headed for the bathroom to change, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. The line between pretense and reality was blurring more every day. And Sophie was starting to realize that her heart didn't care about the difference. Dinner was, as predicted, a carefully orchestrated torture session. Margaret had invited several family friends, old money socialites who looked at Sophie like she was a fascinating insect they wanted to study. The conversation flowed from art to politics to society gossip, all topics designed to highlight Sophie's outsider status. "Sophie, dear," said a woman who'd been introduced as Mrs. Langley, "what do your parents do?" Ethan was rather vague about your family background. Sophie felt Ethan's hand find hers under the table, squeezing reassuringly. "My mother passed away a few years ago," she said quietly. "She was a nurse. My father, well, he wasn't really in the picture much." "Oh, how tragic," Mrs. Langley said with false sympathy. "And no other family to speak of?" "Actually," Sophie said, remembering her cover story, "I was raised by my mother's best friend after she died, Clara Sullivan. She and her family took me in like I was their own daughter." "Sullivan," Margaret mused. "I don't believe I know any Sullivans in our circle." "They're from Boston," Sophie said. "Clara's married to a high school English teacher. They're humble people, but wonderful." Lucas leaned forward with interest. "A teacher? How quaint. And they'll be coming to the engagement party?" "Of course," Ethan said smoothly. "I'm looking forward to seeing Clara again. It's been too long." Sophie shot him a grateful look, but she could see the wheels turning in Lucas's head. He was planning something, and she had a feeling it wasn't going to be pleasant. After dinner, the group moved to the library for drinks and what Margaret called intimate conversation. Sophie found herself cornered by Chloe while the men discussed business. "You know," Chloe said conversationally, "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about knowing the difference between being wealthy and being worthless. Interesting, don't you think? How people reveal themselves when they're angry." Sophie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That's not what I meant, wasn't it?" Chloe moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell me, Sophie, what's your endgame here? Marriage to Ethan will make you very rich, but it won't make you one of us. We'll always know you don't belong." "Maybe I don't want to belong to a group of people who think money makes them better than everyone else." Chloe's laugh was soft and vicious. "Oh, honey, if that were true, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be wearing a $50,000 engagement ring and playing dress-up in designer clothes." She leaned even closer, her breath warm against Sophie's ear. "We both know what you are. The question is, does Ethan?" Before Sophie could respond, Chloe had glided away, leaving Sophie feeling like she'd been slapped, because the worst part was, Chloe wasn't entirely wrong. Sophie was playing dress-up, wearing clothes she couldn't afford, pretending to be someone she wasn't. The question was, who was she pretending for, the world or herself? "Sophie," Ethan's voice pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. "You okay? You look pale, just tired." She managed. "It's been a long day." Ethan's eyes searched her face, clearly not buying her excuse, but he didn't push. "Want to get some air? The beach is beautiful at night." Sophie nodded, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the library. They slipped out through the French doors and walked down to the private beach, the sound of waves washing away some of the tension in Sophie's shoulders. "Talk to me," Ethan said quietly as they walked along the water's edge. "What did Chloe say to you?" "Nothing I haven't thought myself," Sophie admitted. "She's not wrong about some things." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. "What things?" Sophie looked out at the ocean, gathering her courage. "I don't belong here, Ethan. In this world with these people, I'm playing a part, wearing a costume, but underneath it all, I'm still just a broke journalist from Brooklyn who never knew her father and watched her mother die alone." "Sophie, no, let me finish." She turned to meet his eyes, needing him to understand. "Chloe called me a gold digger, and maybe she's right. Maybe I am just here for the money, pretending to be something I'm not, because it's easier than admitting I'm nobody special." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight with what looked like anger. When he finally spoke, His voice was low and fierce. "You want to know what I see when I look at you, Sophie?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I see a woman who infiltrated one of the most exclusive events in Manhattan, armed with nothing but courage and determination. I see someone who faced down my mother's interrogation without blinking, who stood up to Lucas and Chloe without losing her grace." Ethan stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. "I see someone who made me laugh at a tennis match, who challenged me to be better than my worst impulses, who cares enough about 20,000 employees to fake a marriage to save their jobs." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I'm not finished." His thumbs brushed away the tears that had started to fall. "You want to know the truth? You're the most real person I've ever met. You don't hide behind money or status or family names. You're just Sophie, and Sophie is extraordinary." The sincerity in his voice, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious, broke something open in Sophie's chest. Before she could stop herself, she was reaching up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You don't really know me," she whispered. "I know enough." Ethan's voice was rough, strained. "I know that you make me want to be the man you think I am." The confession hung between them like a bridge. Neither of them was sure they should cross. Sophie could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge, could sense that whatever happened next would change everything. "Ethan," she whispered. And she wasn't sure if it was a warning or a plea. "I know this is complicated," he said quietly. "I know we said this was just business, just a mutually beneficial arrangement. But Sophie, what I feel for you, it's not fake anymore. It hasn't been fake for a while." Sophie's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm falling for you hard and fast and completely against every rule I set for myself." Ethan's smile was rueful, self-deprecating. "I'm saying that somewhere between the tennis match and watching you handle my family's psychological warfare, I stopped pretending to be in love with you and started actually being in love with you." The words hit Sophie like a tidal wave. He loved her. Ethan Caldwell, who could have anyone, who was brilliant and powerful and completely out of her league, loved her. "I love you too," she whispered, the confession torn from somewhere deep in her chest. "I've been trying not to, trying to remember this is all fake. But Ethan, I love you so much it scares me." Ethan's smile was blinding, transformative. "Yeah? Yeah." Sophie laughed through her tears. "God help me. But yeah." And then he was kissing her, his hands tangling in her hair as he pulled her closer. This wasn't like their practice kisses or their public displays of affection. This was desperate and real, and full of months of suppressed longing. Sophie melted into him, her arms winding around his neck as she kissed him back with everything she had. He tasted like whiskey and possibility, like home and adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "So," Ethan said, his forehead resting against hers, "where does this leave us?" Sophie's laugh was shaky but genuine. "I have no idea. This wasn't part of the plan. The best things never are." Ethan's smile was soft, wondering. "Sophie, I want this to be real. Not just for the next few months, but real. Forever real." Sophie's heart soared and crashed at the same time, because as much as she wanted to say yes, as much as she wanted to believe in fairy tales and happy endings, she knew they still had massive obstacles to overcome. "Your family will never accept me," she said quietly. "Then they'll have to learn to live with disappointment." Ethan's voice was firm, certain. "Sophie, I don't care what my mother thinks or what Lucas schemes or what the society pages write. I care about you, about us. And when they find out about our fake engagement, when they learn that this all started as a lie." Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. "Then we tell them the truth. That it started as business, but became something real. That sometimes the best love stories begin with the most unlikely circumstances." Sophie wanted to believe him. Standing there on the beach with moonlight reflecting off the water and Ethan's arms around her, it felt possible to believe in happy endings. "What about the inheritance? The company? We'll figure it out." Ethan's confidence was unwavering. "Sophie, I built an empire from nothing once. If I have to do it again to be with you, then that's what I'll do." The magnitude of what he was offering hit Sophie like a physical blow. He was willing to give up everything: his inheritance, his company, his family's approval for her. "Ethan, I can't let you do that. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do it." His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Sophie Bennett, you are worth more than all of it combined. You're worth everything." The tears came then, full force. Years of loneliness and insecurity and feeling like she wasn't enough washing away in the face of his absolute certainty. "I love you," she sobbed against his chest. "I love you so much, I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to do anything with it," Ethan said softly, his arms tightening around her. "Just let me love you back. Let me prove to you every day that you're worth everything I could ever give up." They stood there on the beach for a long time, holding each other as the waves crashed around their feet. Sophie felt something settle in her chest, a peace she'd never experienced before. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't alone. She wasn't fighting the world by herself. She had Ethan, and maybe, if they were very lucky and very brave, that would be enough to overcome everything else. As they walked back toward the house, fingers intertwined, Sophie caught sight of a figure, watching them from one of the upstairs windows. Lucas Caldwell stood silhouetted against the light, his expression unreadable from this distance. "He saw us," she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his grip on her hand never wavered. "Let him look. Let them all look. I'm done hiding how I feel about you." But as they entered the house and made their way up to their room, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas had seen more than just two people in love. She had the unsettling suspicion that he'd seen an opportunity, and knowing Lucas Caldwell, that couldn't be good for anyone. Still, as Ethan's arms came around her in the privacy of their room, as he whispered promises and endearments against her hair, Sophie decided to worry about Lucas tomorrow. Tonight, she just wanted to hold on to this feeling, the overwhelming, terrifying, wonderful knowledge that she was loved completely and without reservation. Tomorrow, they would face whatever schemes Lucas was hatching. Tomorrow, they would figure out how to turn their fake engagement into a real marriage without destroying everything Ethan had worked for. Tonight, they would just be Sophie and Ethan, two people who had found each other against all odds and decided that love was worth fighting for. As Sophie drifted off to sleep in Ethan's arms, she allowed herself to believe, for the first time in her life, that she might actually get her happily ever after. The question was whether the rest of the world would let her keep it.